Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is anna-mart, or Sam for short. Today is part 5 of this series. In this beginner tutorial, we're going to do setup and texturing. This is really fun and really brings the whole project to life. Let's get right into this. Okay, so back to where we left off last time. Now we're going to do the scene and create a really good setup for the final render. First thing we want to do is close this window. So you go there, click and drag to the right. And then we can go out of pose mode with Control Tab and hide these bones for now. Let's just hide the camera and the light so that we can see what we're doing. And now we want to create a floor for the scene. So Shift A, Mesh and Plane. And we just want to scale it up with S and so that it's really big. And that looks right to me. And then we want to add some walls as well. So basically we're just going to add 2 planes which create a corner in the background. So Shift A, Mesh, Plane. Then we can go into front view and rotate it 90 degrees. Then we can move it to the side and scale it up. We can go into top view now. Duplicate it with Shift D. Rotate it with 90 degrees. And move it that way. We can scale both of these up. Now if we go into the camera view, which is number pad 0, we can see how the render will look. And we want to move the camera up a bit so that we can just see everything that's going on. So let's just Alt H to unhide everything. And then to move the camera, we just select it and press G. And then drag with your mouse. Now I want to add another plane, which is where the stove and the sink is going to be. So Shift A, Mesh, Plane. Go into front view, move it up, and scale it. But I want it to be a little bit thinner, so I'm just going to press S and then X. And then G, X to around there, and then we can just scale it up more. Just make sure it's not sticking into the wall, so we can just move it this way. Just like that. And now we are ready to add the stove and the sink that we already made. So find yours or unhide them or wherever you put them, and then you can just put them into the scene. If I unhide mine, I think they're down here. So I just want to select all of these. Select everything. And then move it up with GZ. So around there. And then I want to scale everything up. Just like that. Go into top view with G. Move it up. Like that. And then I just want to move them down so that they just fit into this plane. So if you're going to front view, it might be easier. I just also want to move these stove tops down to the stove because I can see that they're not actually on it. Let's focus on the sink first. So you want to move it up so that just a little bit sticks out of the top. But we don't want the table to go right through the sink. So we're going to cut a hole inside it. So let's just select this table. Go into edit mode with tab, into top view, and then we want to make some loop cuts with Control R. And then just slide it up to the edge of the sink. Create another one. And then create some more on all of the edges. So you're going to have 4 in total. And then if you're going to face select mode and select this face in the middle, press X and then faces, you can see that the sink is now table free, but the floor is still going through it. So we want to move the whole floor down by a lot. So go out of edit mode, select the floor, and then press G and Z to move it down. There we go. So that's the sink. Now we want to focus on the stove. So select the stove and its tops, and then move it up with GZ until they're all visible above the table. And then we want to move the pan and the egg and all the armatures up so that it doesn't go through the stove top and that it just rests on top. Just like that. If you now go into rendered view, you can see that it looks pretty good. And that's the whole setup that we need. Now we just want to add some textures so that everything isn't just white. This is going to make the scene look very, very realistic, and that will give us a really good looking final render. So this is just the setup, and now we're going to add some wooden and marble textures to everything. So the walls I'm just going to make plain white, but they don't have a material yet, so they're brighter than they should be. So select the wall, go to the materials tab, press new, and then name it wall. And then we can make it a little bit more gray here at the base color. Then we can select the other wall, and then go to this drop down at the side and select the wall. Now that those are finished, I want to go into more depth with texturing. For this tutorial, we're going to add marble textures to the tabletop and a wooden texture to the floor. So first of all, let's create a new viewport. And now I want to change this to UV editor. The next thing I want to do is select this table plane, go into edit mode, select everything with A, right click and select UV unwrap faces, and then we will go to unwrap. What this basically does, it just takes the mesh and opens it up until it's one flat object. Now since this is a plane, it's already flat, which makes it easier, but if you unwrap something more complicated, like say the frying pan, it's going to be a little bit more complicated. But for now, all we need to do is just press unwrap, and then at the right, this mesh will appear, which looks exactly like the plane that we have. Then we want to go and change this to shader editor, where we did the materials previously. And then if you have this sidebar, just press N to remove it. Now what we want to do is create a new material, and I'm going to name it table. We're going to use these two default principled and material output shaders, and then just add a few other things. The textures I used for this tutorial I got from Polygon, which is a website that has a lot of really good textures, and they have many free ones as well. If you get a subscription, you can pay for them and get many others as well, but I use the free ones and they are very good quality. So just go to textures, then go to free, and then you will see all of these textures which are completely free to use, and then you can just download them. The ones I'm going to use for this tutorial is this wood flooring 61. You can either download all of them or just the ones we're going to use, which is the normal, the displacement, and the color or diffuse one. You can just free download this, save it somewhere, and then open that up and drop it into Blender when we're going to use this. The second one I'm going to use is this marble Kalakata 004. I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but that's how I just said it. So we're also going to use this one, and we're going to use the normal, gloss, and diffuse, or you can just download all of them. Now as I said, for the texturing you'll need 3 different files. The first one is the color map, the next one is the normal map, and the third one is the roughness. So go to where you save them and just open the file, and then you can just bring them in here, and then you just want to click and drag the map and drop it into the node editor. So the first one is the color one, and I just want to grab this color dot and connect it to base color. And then you can already see the marble pattern on this table. The next thing we want to do is add the normal map. But before we can connect it to this normal input, we need to add something else, which is called a normal map. So press Shift A, vector, and then normal map, and then put it in the middle of these two. Connect color to color, and then normal to normal. And this will add some of the texture to it, so that it's not just an image that's pasted on top. Now we also want to add the roughness, but when we downloaded the files, they didn't have a roughness map. But luckily, a glossy map and a roughness map is basically exactly the same thing, but they are just inverses of one another. So if we add a glossy map instead, and connect it to roughness, let's just move these around. All we need to do is add an invert node. So to do that, we just say Shift A, and then click on the search button and type in invert. Then you can select that and put it in between these. So when you have a map, it has black and white colors on it. And the white will represent the roughness or the smoothness of it, and the black will represent the other one. In a glossy map, the white is the smoothness, and in a roughness map, the white is the roughness. So if we just add a glossy map and invert the colors, then it will act as a roughness map. That's all we need to do for this. Just remember to change this sRGB to non-color on both the glossy and the normal map. Everything looks smooth and realistic now, but we have one problem. This marble pattern is massive. So if we go back to the UV editor up here and go into edit mode, then we can see that this image is right behind the UV map. So we can scale it up. And then you can see that the pattern is getting smaller. We can also rotate it to change where the patterns are, or we can scale it down to make the patterns bigger. So you can just play around until you find something that you really like. I'm going to make mine just like this. So now the table is done. Now I want to move on to the floor. We can just select the floor, go into edit mode, press A to select all, and then do the same thing, unwrap it. Right click, UV unwrap faces, and then unwrap. Now you can see that it's just one plane, which is what we expected. And now we want to go back into the shader editor so that we can create a texture for this. So create new material, and I'm going to name this floor. Then we just want to open up the file where we saved everything, and then add the color and connect it to base color. Then we want to do the same thing with the normal map that we did previously. Add the normal node first. And then we also want to add the roughness. But once again, we only have a glossy map. So select glossy map, drag it inside, connect it to roughness. But then we also need to add the invert node. So Shift A, search invert, and drop it in between them. And then just remember to change the glossy and the normal map nodes to non-color. And now if we move down here and zoom in a bit, you can see the texture of the floor looks really good. Now if you go to our camera viewport with number pad 0, you can see that the floor isn't visible at the moment. So we want to select the walls in the floor and move it back. So select the walls and then shift select the floor. And then press G and Shift Z to move it back on all of the axes except the Z axis. Till about there, so that the floor is visible. And then we can zoom back in. And that is it for the texturing and the setup. It's really easy to do and it looks really cool at the end. And that's the end of this tutorial. That was fairly short and easy, but it's very important to make sure that your texturing and setup is right. Composition is a very big subject and I might make a separate video on that in the future. But for now, this is the end of the tutorial, and next week we're going to dive into rendering, which is really fun. Then you can have a final animation video as well as an image.